Good afternoon, and welcome to the 2020 Black Literary Suite Black Writing in Real Time panel from the Project on the History of Black Writing. I'm Kai Hansen, as Sarah mentioned. Christopher Peace and I are co-chairs of today's event, and I want to thank you all so much for attending. All of us here at HBW worked so hard to make this event great, and getting to share it with all of you today has made all that hard work worth it. I would like to quickly acknowledge our BLS team, you know me and Chris, but so many other wonderful people have worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make this happen. A special shout out goes to Mona Ahmed, our former communications specialist, who is now in law school, but still found time to help us get BLS up and running. HBW works to preserve Black literature, as well as help make it more accessible to the public. The Black Literary Suite aids in this mission by educating the larger community on lesser known figures in Black literature and in the arts. If you're interested in what HBW is doing going forward, be on the lookout for information for our upcoming National Endowment for the Humanities funded Summer Institute, Hurston on the Horizon, Past, Present, and Future, where 25 higher education teachers will explore how best to teach Zora Neale Hurston's life and works. Also, be sure to follow HBW on social media to stay updated with our projects. We are Project HBW on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm now going to hand it over to my co-chair, Christopher Peace.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christopher, as Kai mentioned. Thanks once again for joining us for 2020's Black Literary Suite, Black Writing in Real Time. We're very excited to hear from this stellar panel. This panel is a rare and unusual addition to this BLS exhibit, focused on exploring film adaptations from books that we know. Our purpose, however, is to give that bigger picture, the what, the why, and the how Black film has engaged us through time. We hope you will also learn about those books and film adaptations that have been easily forgotten. If Black film gives us history, past and present, real and reimagined, it has become the place where we see Black stories come alive. Today's multi-billion-dollar industry has capitalized on these stories, but there is literally so much more behind the scenes. To gain as much out of this experience as possible, we encourage you to visit our digital timeline, interactive map, and selected filmography on the HBW website, as they highlight works that range from the antebellum period to the current Black film renaissance. To get us started, let me introduce tonight's moderator, Professor Darren Kennedy. Professor Kennedy teaches playwriting in the Department of English here at KU, where he is also the Director of Undergraduate Studies. Raised in Topeka, Kansas, his award-winning plays have captivated audiences throughout the United States. Kennedy has more than 15 stage productions and a host of residencies, and remains one of KU's most popular and engaging professors on and off the stage and page. So during this panel discussion, please remember to put your questions in all caps in the chat as we collect them for you. Thanks so much for leading us in this conversation, Professor Kennedy. I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Chris. Most popular. Hilarity ensued. I am so glad that HBW has invited me to be here, and so thrilled to get to talk with this panel. We will go for about an hour of just shooting some prepared questions and some dialogue with our panelists, who I'll introduce in just a second. But let me just emphasize and encourage all of you to make use of the chat. And if you hear something and you want to chat with each other while this is going, make it lit, make it live. It's 4 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon, so live your best lives. All that we ask is that for the Q&A section, which we will have at the end, make sure that if you have a question for it, to put that in all caps so we can find it easily in the chat, right? So I am thrilled. We're all going to lean into those great things that Chris pointed out about power that Black writing has brought to the cinema. And the wonderful thing is that the folks that are here on this panel come from a variety of disciplines, of competencies. And so it's going to be a real treat to hear people with such different perspectives and different life stories and entrances and gateways talk to us about this work. So with that, without further ado, it's going to be kind of the first portion of this intro is going to be a little bit of me just saying a name and a title. And then what we've asked is that each of the panelists give us their aha moment when it comes to Black writing, Black texts being transitioned into cinema. And I encourage them to think about that aha in any kind of way, whether it is something as an audience member that made you say, oh my gosh, this is something powerful that's saying something that needs to be seen and heard, or if it's something transformative of the actual production or creative aspect of it, or the interpretive portion of it. All of those are all in play here. So I'm just going to go across what I have on my screen. So I'd like to start with Danielle Green, who is a PhD candidate here at the University of Kansas Film and Media Studies Department, who also, as it turns out, I know, isn't it just an ace producer has an amazing future ahead of her as well. So Danielle, would you start us?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for your introduction. Like you said, I'm a PhD candidate in film and media studies. I come from sort of Detroit and Midwest sort of area. And so between Detroit and Mississippi, my family is really that aha moment. So growing up is where I got this interest in Black film, and sort of seeing representations of myself and my family and sort of the communities that I've seen on screen, which wasn't, very often in terms of, some of the mainstream channels, but you did see some of them. So, you sort of grab hold to those. So that's sort of my general aha moment. And then thinking of adaptation specifically, it's more or less thinking about studying adaptation and studying how film sort of relates to and creates space and for audiences within theaters, and sort of have that suspension of disbelief. And so for me, when I started studying that, was where I said, okay, now I can start to see where this is being actually happening, and I can pinpoint it. So that's sort of my aha moment, and I can talk more about that, but thank you.
Mm-hmm. And we will lean into that as well. I love it. Okay, so next we have Jocelyn Jennings, who is Director of Casting Administration for Netflix. Jocelyn, would you share with us your aha moment or moments, frankly?
No, sure. I think when I got to school, when I got to college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I changed my major 6 times. I mean, it was everywhere from marine biology to psych to poli-sci. And then I stumbled upon a communications course, and I was like, well, this is easy, and I like to do this. And then I started getting more into history and African American studies. And I said, well, this is easy. I like to do this. And then by junior year, there was a class called Blacks in Film. And it kind of was a combination of history, African American studies, and communications in film. And on day 1 of that class, that was my moment. I said, this is why I came to school. This is why I came to college. Who knew it took me 2 years to get here? But this doesn't even feel like learning. It doesn't feel hard. It feels like this is where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be doing.
I love it. And I love that it actually, I mean, this is for the nerds in us, that it starts from a class, right? That it starts from a pursuit of knowledge.
I will never forget my professor, by the way. So there you have it.
See, there you go. Okay, thank you. Up next, we have KU's very own Kevin Wilmot, writer, director, producer, Oscar winner, and all around cool cat. Kev, your aha moment, please.
Well, hell, I don't really know what to say. Uh, I guess for me, I loved film as a kid, as a little kid. We went our neighborhood, went to the movies every weekend. Back then, in the olden days, when there was wagons and horses, and before they invented the wheel, actually. I think you don't remember that, Darren, but that's a couple months ago. There was this thing called double features. We went to double features, and I even remember before BET was a network, and BET came on Friday night for like an hour, like 2 hours. BET came on for 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And all the Black people in the country scrambled to get to their TV it came on at 10:30 for about 2 hours. They showed one movie, and it was called the BET channel, and they showed one Black movie, and sometimes it wouldn't come in good. You had to have your antenna cocked up, put some aluminum foil on your antenna, whatnot.
Yes.
But that showed you how desperate we were to see ourselves, and so I grew up like that, and watching Gordon Parks' early films, Learning Tree. Of course, blaxploitation movies was a big thing to me. I got to see a different Black film every week for about 6 years there.
Mm-hmm.
So that probably was my big aha moment.
I love that it's a reminder that we used to be able to organize our lives around the media that we encounter.
That's right. And folks would call each other, hey, some Black folks on TV right now.
TV. You better turn on channel 4.
Get to your TV right now.
Right. I'm of a generation that remembers the quotation, turn on channel 4, at least I'll burn the house down. But that's for maybe another discussion. Great. Okay. So next, we have the great pleasure of having Malcolm Wright with us, writer, director, and founder of Quiet Heart Film. So Malcolm, would you give us your aha moment?
Yeah, so my personal aha moment has to do with the progression that we as people are making in terms of escaping stereotypes, and it's a never-ending process, and you think you're done, and then you realize you're still in a box, and sometimes it's not even someone else's box, it's a box of your own making, and so you just keep climbing out of boxes and thinking you're free, and then climbing out of another one. And the big box that I climbed out of that really stands out is that as Richard Wright's grandson, I was in a certain channel of thinking, and I think a lot of Black people can see themselves in this, because it's not just people who were sort of really at the core of civil rights. Even if you were on the periphery and cheering on, or if you went to a few marches, or just were there in spirit, you do feel like, okay, this is part of what it is to be Black, is our liberation and becoming architects of our own liberation. And then realizing that too is a box was an aha moment for me. And realizing that at some stage we will graduate to being the architects of other people's liberations, and that the identification process between ourselves and between social groups and cultural groups and ethnicities and even species kind of kaleidoscopes on into infinity, and this empathy and valuing of truth and justice doesn't really stop within our group or within our species, and that kind of blew my mind. It might sound self-evident to some people, but so and then when it comes to adaptation, well, we deal with a few adaptations that come our way, and we have to decide whether we want them to go forwards. And my aha moment with that, again, will seem self-evident to some people, but it was very liberating for me to realize that, hey, all we have to do is decide whether we like the artist or not. Agonizing over You know,
Mhm.
are they going to be true to Richard Wright's vision with all of the pain that we know is enveloped in his work? And, you know, are we going to end up shooting ourselves because we just feel that we've betrayed him by letting someone mangle him? You know, all of that suddenly fell away, and I realized it's very simple. If we like the artist, if we like what they've done so far, we just have to decide whether we're going to give them a chance, and then from then on, it's not on our shoulders. Big aha moment.
But I think that and hopefully we can go back to this, because I think a number of you can speak to this. The way that people talk about filmmaking and production being about relationships, which I think sometimes when we're sitting in the audience and looking at a film that's been translated to, we're watching our favorite book on film, we don't necessarily think about the relationships that it took to make the thing happen. So I'd be curious. So maybe we can chat about that a little bit as well. So our last, I think Stefan is our last panelist, right? I haven't missed anyone. Okay, so Stefan Bristol, who is another someone else that we are very thrilled to have with us. We know him as writer and director of See You Yesterday. Stefan, would you tell us your aha moment?
It's gonna take all night because I have several aha moments, to be honest with you. My name is Stefan. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I grew up in both Brooklyn and Long Island, and being Black, grew up in these two areas of the city. You get to be around Black people, but you also get to be around different cultures. Some of my best friends was Asian. And some close friends of mine was Jewish. Another friend of mine was Puerto Rican. So you grow up and you have the strong desire to just be more around just Black people. So when I went to Morehouse College, shout out to Morehouse, that's why I want to rep. My aha moment there, I want to understand Black people, right? But I went to thinking that Black people in this one type of thing. We would just want this one box that the rest of the country come from. But I realized that we are extremely diverse, just as diverse as white folks are. I'm Caribbean. My mother and my parents, but both my parents are from Guyana, Georgetown, Guyana. And going through a HBCU made me realize we don't all share the same thoughts. We don't all share the same culture. We don't all share the same ideas and for music and stuff like that. So that was refreshing for me, because when I got into NYU graduate film school, all my white counterparts thought Black people was just this, which is another aha moment. And another aha moment, my first year at NYU graduate film school, is that all my Black classmates were hiring white actors for their films, and I was the only one that was hiring Black actors for the film. And it changed until consecutive years, because they didn't know what's the deal. I wasn't with the bullshit. But anyhow, that was a big aha moment for me.
Say it again.
I wasn't with the bullshit. but the thing is, when I got into my thesis film, trying to figure out, how to make what's unique for me, I want to do a sci-fi film that's with Black people in it, right? But I push it even forward. I live in Brooklyn, one of my favorite neighborhoods, Flatbush, and I just see a lot of Caribbean people there. And I'm from that neighborhood. I grew up, going to my neighborhood countless times. And I'm like, aha, I want to represent my people here.
And is Flatbush where you grew up?
I grew up in Coney Island, but I grew up going to Flatbush to go to Bobby's, get my, curry chicken.
Yep.
Beef patty with cocoa bread, Ackee saltfish.
Mind
you, the best people who make curry chicken and roti is Guyanese people. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm just going to tell you, Dr. Giselle Anatol's hand has shot up. There, I'm going to keep moving, and Giselle's going to send me probably a message in the chat, or maybe Giselle will just send it to you directly, Stefan. I don't know. This is great. I'm so glad that you are all here. I think for my first question. Like I said, this first one will go to everyone, and then we'll start to see just kind of how discussion flows from there. And I'll start to target a few, but I want you all to feel free, panelists, to respond to each other. Don't look at me as a prism. I'm just here as kind of the ignition switch. Y'all are the fire. Y'all are the interesting people. So this first big one, you know, there's a filmography that's part of the suite. I mean, it's got, you know, some great pieces like Beloved, Go Tell It on the Mountain, Native Son, The Color Purple included. Some other pieces that sometimes we don't always necessarily think about, like A Hero Ain't Nothing But a Sandwich. We have translated so many important pieces of African-American literature, which is American literature, to the film medium. From your perspectives as filmmakers, as audience members, as producers, what are some of the challenges, the surprises, the triumphs of translating these kind of texts? When I think about what Stefan's saying about confronting the notion of the diversity of the Black experience, Jocelyn, when you were talking about that kind of move to bringing together history and film, I'm thinking about how all those things can sort of play into, once you start to say, now we're actually going to translate these works into film, what are some of the challenges, but what are some of the surprises that maybe those of us who have a more audience and passive entrance to it might not be thinking about? So that's kind of big. Take that any way you want to. Kev, do you mind starting on this one? I change up the order a little.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I think that something that we don't probably a lot about in the context of the question really is that really until Netflix and streaming and a few years ago, until those companies showed up, you know, Black adaptation was incredibly compromised for a good number of reasons. You got to understand, it's like most of the time Black people weren't doing the adaptation of the literature. You got to understand that oftentimes the companies that were doing the adaptation had different agendas than Black people probably would have had in terms of looking at what the story was really, the essence of what the story was really about. I mean, most of the time these stories would have been adapted really to appeal to a you know, what they would call a crossover audience. So it wasn't really adapted to please Black folks, it was really adapted to please white folks more than probably anybody. And so that I mean, you know, when you go back to some of those earlier adaptations from the 70s and 80s, 90s really, you know, you've got to look at it through the prism of that, because that's where a lot of those projects, you know, I mean, not all of them obviously, but a lot of them, you know, were compromised. I would call it being compromised in that sense. And especially, I mean, studios, until, you know, just, you got to understand, like Black Panther, you know, that's not what we would say a literary adaptation, but in terms of the way Hollywood looks at Black movies, that was the first international Black film, you know? Mm-hmm. So in terms of, you know, you got to understand, they look at movies through the prism of money. They don't look at it through the prism of literature or high art or anything like that. So when that movie made a lot of money, that made a lot more people in Hollywood interested in just Black subject matter, period. Mm-hmm. And so that's why when you go back and you look at those earlier adaptations, you've got to look at it through the point of view that those companies had about those films, and their intent often was trying to really, you know, please white audiences, make sure that white audiences. I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. One time they were interested in me adapting a new version of the book Sounder, And so I went back and I read the book again, and I knew the early version very well, because the first version I thought was really great.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, I mean, it's a classic film. But one of the things I noticed in the early version was that there was a white character in the movie that was not in the book, and it was a white sympathetic character. And I said, you know, and I was talking to the producer about it. I said, you know, I was thinking that maybe we don't have to have that character in this new version, because it puts more pressure on the boy. The book was about how the boy kind of solved his problem pretty much kind of like damn near on his own, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the producer said to me, white people don't like movies where all the white people are bad. And that I always felt was pretty much that way of thinking. This would have probably been in the early 2000s. I had that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So until the recent, you know, groundbreaking things that have happened in Netflix, Amazon, all these new opportunities that have come up that have broken up this kind of thing, that was how they thought.
Mm-hmm. It's, you know, I want to use that to kind of bridge. If I pull, Justin, if I could pull you in on the same big question, and thinking about, you know, I know part of me wants to say, oh, tell us about what's going on at Netflix, but more so kind of from your world of casting, right? In that professional space of thinking about how that affects, you know, what lands in front of us, and how that either complicates, you know, how we discuss Blackness on screen, and how you have seen that discussion develop, if you've had to ever intervene, and kind of what you've seen there.
Well, maybe I can do a part of that, but let me backtrack a little bit. Even though casting is in my title, I mean, I hire casting directors. I'm not so much part of the creative casting process.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more focused on the business and the money. So once I say that, to answer kind of the question in a broad way, like the biggest challenge from my perspective has been money. Like,
mm-hmm. Please continue to talk about that.
No one is giving the money to the Black people. It's almost like a rite of passage. You have to prove yourself. You have to have a name. Why are we going to like produce your project? Why are we going to fund and back your project? If all you have is text, you know, that's not enough. So to me, just from my experience and what I've been doing, it is hard to get money in Black hands, but there's been a shift. We are shifting. So I will say that hope is not lost. To kind of tackle the rest of the question, surprises for me has been politicians kind of starting to dive into media and entertainment. So perhaps, you know, if the Obamas get their hands on some texts and want to make a film, you know, that impact, that is very surprising for me, coming from where I come from. For them, just trading on name and their inspiration, you know, how they can start to make things happen. I thought that, like, that is surprising for me.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
I just want to piggyback off of that real quick, because I'm going through something very unique right now. And I've been going through it a lot. The casting decisions to get the money for Black films is real. I'm going through that right now. I'm doing a dystopian sci-fi movie. You know, what it sets in a world where, you know, a mother and daughter who are Black, obviously, lives on a planet where there's no oxygen, and you got people trying to come to the bunker, just trying to steal the oxygen machine. really, the script is really great. I'm the director for it. And the challenge is now is, okay, there's been a long-winded theory, in my opinion, a bullshit theory saying that black film is not sellable overseas. So, okay, we got to go through the sales agents and all those people. And the sales agents are saying, okay, we love the script, we want to make this movie, and thank God you got the good director, knock on wood. But who is going to be the cast? That's how we're going to sell the movie. And there's only like, 5 named actresses in Hollywood that can pull that off. And 3 of them already passed on it. Not because the project is wrong, because they're big and they're incredible actresses. Give example, Regina King, Lupita Nyong'o, and Halle Berry. They'll easily get the money and for us to make the film. We don't have them because they have so much going on for themselves. So we lucked out. So what do we do now? And that's the challenge we're having right now with this film. And it's with a really, really good, strong production company called Thunder Road, who produced all the John Wick movies. Here I am as a Black director trying to come with a very specific Black perspective in a sci-fi genre, and we run into this ridiculous issue. It was
so many more than those top 5. I know that you have that focus on
we're
top 5.
right. No, that's my point. That's
know.
my point. And that's why I told us, I said, look, we don't need these specific actresses to make a good movie. But they said, no, we have to go through these channels in order, to justify making this film. And it's ridiculous. It really makes my skin crawl.
Jocelyn, there's a sort of a connective thread that I want to ask you that comes from Stefan's point. You had mentioned you are sensing a shift, and I'd be curious what you feel that shift is.
I think with the Black Lives Matter movement and white people now having the time to recognize and accept that there is systemic racism, and the work that they're doing to start to break that down is shifting. It's shifting the entertainment industry, it's shifting the world. I hope the momentum keeps up. I think it is going to keep up in entertainment, because now we want the Black stories. Now that is like, everyone is paying attention. So maybe you don't need to have the top 5 Black actresses to sell. Maybe you just have good text, you have that good foundation, and now you can sell it because people are looking in the mirror and saying, they're having their aha moment about the country and about systemic racism and how they've been moving through the world. And it's finally, apparent that things need to change. So I feel a shift, and I feel, triumphs. I feel like every Black film that has been made is a triumph, but I think more are coming in the future.
Great. I hear that. Danielle, can I pull you into this question?
Most definitely.
What's going on in the adaptations for you?
Yeah, so I love what you all have been saying. My question, I have more of a question than a comment. But really just looking at history and looking at, the Negro being in vogue in the 20s. That sort of, we see cycles where we want Black stories. I think there has been a shift, most definitely, but it feels like it goes in cycles, right? So we get, films, we get race films, we get, the sort of earlier Blaxploitation films, we get new Black films, we have cycles. And I'm wondering if just projecting toward the future, do we see this as another cycle, or is it going to be continued? Because that has always been the thing, is that, money has just ruled, right? And okay, we're making money right now off of Black stories. Once we stop making money, do we then still have the commitment to make those Black stories? And I guess that's always my question, especially, you know, studying these cycles. And for me, my research, what I like to do and sort of try to do is celebrate what we've been able to accomplish. I like to celebrate these stories and like to actually celebrate the fact that we are getting, you know, Black stories and Black characters on screen, and in sort of these triumphant but also very real stories. But I sort of sometimes get concerned about that you know, money is sort of all powerful still in this industry, and so who controls that money? But I think one point that Jocelyn, you raised about politicians is that, you know, in the Obamas, they have clout. Like they have, so if you can get people like that, you know, behind and pushing and committed to this type of filmmaking, I think that has a real, it gives me sort of more hope for the future. But the question is, do we feel like that is something that is going to be sustained, really?
Danielle, I love that question. So I'm actually going to lean into it and pose it to your fellow panelists, because I love where that's going. And this, I do like asking, you know, you throw an even broader canvas, right? You say, if we look back, if we pull in an Oscar Michaud, if we think all the way back to the 20s and we pull forward up to Kev's point about even saying, okay, something that splinters after blaxploitation into some other, maybe you call them popular genres and forms. And we think about the text that Black folks are creating, and then what of those are making it to adaptation, whether it's television or film. I would sort of wonder, in addition to what Danielle's saying to all of you, do you feel like that what is the cycle shifting? Are we seeing a new turn in the cycle, or is this more of the same? And I hear Danielle's point. I'd be curious what some of you think about also the effect of money right now. Maybe Malcolm, since we haven't gotten to you yet on the first one, would you mind taking the first?
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, I don't feel that I'm particularly enlightened on the subject, but my opinion, I mean, first of all, I just want to acknowledge the uncertainty of the moment. You know, anything could happen tomorrow. You know, the state could take hold of film production and we could become a fascist nation in the next year. So it's you know, that's one extreme. Then if that doesn't happen, I think that there's all the possibility in the world that this will sustain itself, because we're an industry that's based on relations. So whenever one of us makes it, we then can, you know, we start doing our own films, we start spreading the success, and so, and of course we don't just hire Black people. It's not, you know, we're not inbred in that way, but we are able to extend opportunity. And so in that way, that's a kind of a momentum that you can't easily break. So that gives me heart. Apart from that, I mean, you know, it's kind of like having a crystal ball, right? Like I really don't know.
I absolutely hear that. And you actually do right there point out certainly one of the struggles but the triumphs of sort of wedging open the door as a filmmaker for someone who might be behind or following in footsteps. But anyone else want to take up Danielle's question? Because
yeah, if I could just say, I think it has shifted, and you know, but the shift, the door isn't like wide open. The door has been opened, and I think the door has been opened because there are so many companies that need product right now, that need material, and streaming has just opened up so many things that you know, when those things open up, Black folks typically get opportunities they haven't had before. Now, as Malcolm was kind of hinting at, and what Jocelyn and Stefan was saying, I mean, you know, the money is the whole deal. You know, you can't talk about the art without talking about the money, because the art and the money go together, and the money controls the art. And so right now, Black people are kind of popular right now. You know, we're kind of in right now. And whether we'll be as in as we are now in another couple of years, hard to say. I think we're part of the show now. I think we're getting inroads into the industry. I don't know if there's a, you know, in the old studios, if there's a Black person that can green light a movie yet. I'm not talking about the new streaming company, I'm about the old studios. So, you know, there's just a lot of stuff that needs to happen before I can just go into a studio and say, hey, I want to do The Man Who Lived Underground, you know, and which I always thought would be a great film.
Let me tell you, Kevin, you're psychic. You're psychic. You'll know why later, but go ahead.
And
mind blown.
But you know, I don't think you can just do that yet. I mean, you know, you know, from what I started, you know, almost 30 years ago, it is a lot better than it was then. I mean, when I would walk into a studio then, they would be surprised I was Black. They would noticeably kind of jump and say, oh my God, he's Black. And so that now there's usually one or two Black people in the room. So that, you know, that has definitely progressed a great deal. But you know, the big fear I have, and then I'll shut up. The big fear I have is that with COVID and with everything that's happened, that I worry about movie theaters. I worry about a real shift in the industry. I worry about maybe there's too many streaming services. I just wonder if there's going to be some reconfiguration at some point. And if there is some reconfiguration, how that's going to affect Black storytelling.
That is a question that was on the list. So let's go ahead and lean. How many times have I said lean? Sorry, y'all. Let's run at it. Let's go at it, because I do think that that's vital. And maybe a broad way of looking at this is saying, you know, let's say someone has, you know, I see a message popped up for me right here. Someone says, Dr. Damaris Hill has written this amazing compendium, A Bound Woman is a Dangerous Thing, and I want to convert it into a piece of film. From your various perspectives, are you going to push, what are you going to push someone who says the work has to, I am most concerned about this work retaining its power to speak to Black audiences? Are you saying that it's best to go streaming? Is it best to go film? Is it best to look for independent? Like what are the homes now? Either artistically, you can approach it from that way. Jocelyn, I know you can come at this a little bit from the funding and the business perspective of it. What are the exciting homes for Black work as it's being adapted into cinematic mediums? Or should I pick on someone?
No, I can speak on that from my experience, because I've been blessed enough to have meetings, various production companies in Hollywood, or the industry. I don't know what to say, call it anymore. I've been blessed enough, and it really depends on the production company or the studio or the streaming service. There's no right or wrong way to go about it. I've met with production companies and producers. I'm like, I'm never working with them because clearly they have their own agenda. And then you have companies that gets you, and they really want to advocate like the shift that's happening right now. They really want to advocate for that. And I was blessed enough, again, and this is just an example, like blessed enough for them to close a deal with Netflix on a very, very big action adventure movie, and we had a very extensive conversations. And this action adventure movie is very pertained to Black history and Black culture. So it's like we had honest conversations with Netflix and had other conversations with other studios as well. You know, someone like Warner Brothers and MGM, and they did not get the vision at all. So it really depends on, you know, who it is. It's you know, it's no there's no set rule in my opinion. In my experience.
I'm hearing that. Great. Others.
I would just,
I'm biased. Oh, go ahead.
second everything Stefan said. Totally. Been my total experience as well.
Good. We get a cosign there. Jocelyn, I think I heard you jumping in.
I feel like I'm biased, but you know, I prefer streaming now, just because, I mean, I love going to the movies, I love the experience, but now I can have that whole experience from my home. And now things can be made to not only reach people in the US, but things can be made to reach people all over the world, going the streaming route.
And maybe my question as a follow-up is a little too obvious, Jocelyn, so feel free to complicate it. But to Kev's point, you know, as we think about, and it's hard because I am asking everyone to pull out crystal balls, sorry. We don't know exactly what's coming down the pipe in 2021, but what does this reconfiguration, or do you perceive a reconfiguration as you look through what might be coming for streaming, what might be coming for film, and what does that reconfiguration look like for Black artists and Black storytellers? Is there a difference than their peers who are not?
I think that the thirst is higher now for Black projects, for Black artists, for Black executives. And I think we should ride the momentum. If I piggyback off of Danielle's fear from earlier, I wouldn't worry too much, just because there are people like you and people like me in these places and in these positions that will try to continue to keep up the momentum. But right now, people want to hire Black people. People want to make Black films. People want to make Black series. And we should take advantage of it.
Yeah, and piggyback off of Jocelyn. Every time in a room with the producer or executive, whoever, they're always trying to mention, hey, we trying to figure out our own Attack the Block. You have something like that for us. And it's like, Jesus, like, all right. And so they are thirsty for that, for sure. And it's evident right now, because once Black Panther came out, it was thank God for Ryan Coogler and for doing that. It's been, you know, such a wonderful whirlwind. Now, I mean, recently we got Lovecraft Country, we got Bad Hair. Now they're just announced doing a Static Shock movie. So, you know, right now it's the cycle is high and everything. So, but yeah, there's more. It's just, once again, it's finding the right people to collaborate with.
Danielle, can I pull you into that conversation as well?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you made most definitely great point in terms of having people being in place to ride this momentum, right? Being able to say, okay, you know, we have producers, we have writers, we have people that can take these places. Oh, you need, okay, I'm ready, right? And saying yes, right? And so I think that is a very important and very hopeful part of this. I think the other thing with reconfiguration is what it seems to me is that when you see, you know, streaming platforms, you can be much more direct and niche with different audiences. So you can create, I think, a little bit more for, Black audiences. You can create more for these sort of very specific audiences that don't necessarily have to be bound, thinking about sort of Malcolm's comment earlier, bound to, a necessarily box, but you have a lot more that you don't have to make that one film. And, you can make multiple films and have multiple different audiences watching them. So I think that may be part of this reconfiguration. And then sort of to speak to Kevin's point about, the cinemas, that's a real concern. And so I think that'll be necessary to reconfigure how that actually is going to play out. And I'm not entirely sure, maybe that has something to do with trying to, as they've done, do the streaming, what do you call it, like streaming releases and things like that. Maybe that's a way that they're going to reconfigure the situation. But I do think that what you all have been talking about is something where you have to sort of seize the moment. And I think that's a really sort of poignant point.
I think you bring up something. I'm going to shift us just a little bit. But you brought up audiences, and when I think about, and we've got in our audience, in our participants tonight, we've got some avid readers. And when I think about, I can remember when The Color Purple came out. I can remember when Waiting to Exhale came out, and how the place that these novels, these books held in sort of the popular Black imagination, and how much weight then the film adaptations carry. I sort of now wonder, for all of you, what role do Black audiences play in the making of the film, in the reception of it? It appears to me, particularly when we talk about even whether it's a native son, whether it's a sounder, that the things that you talked about in terms of representation, right? How rarely for decades we got to see ourselves. Suddenly these things are carrying such weight. Is that the same? Does that continue now? What role do Black audiences play in these adaptations? Malcolm, you mind starting us on this one?
Yeah, I'd be happy to jump in. So, so yeah, that was one of the things that I did at one point want to comment on tonight, is that I think that we are in a situation as people where the stakes are that much higher, right? Because we haven't had historically the representation. When we get a chance, people are on the tip of their chairs, like, is he going to get it right? Is, am I going to like this? Is it going to do what it needs to do for us? Is it going to, am I going to feel good at the end of this about us as a people? Like, white people don't have that sort of every time they watch a white film, right? And nowadays, even if that is perhaps a bit less than it was, I think there's still a lot of that. I think there's still a feeling of fragility, a feeling of the stakes are just higher, right? You read a Harry Potter and then you go to see the movie, and are the characters going to be as you imagine them? It matters in a kind of geeky way, and you can get intense about it if that's your thing, but it's not the existential kind of angst that you can have over characters that, whether directly or indirectly are speaking to very raw experiences that indirectly or directly have to do with life and death, and whether you're going to make it in the world or not. And so all of these things are just a little bit more serious, I feel, in Black stories. Even though we can be frivolous, we can be lighthearted, I still feel like there's an undercurrent of all of that for audiences.
Mm-hmm. Kev, can I shoot that to you as well? Like, what have Black audiences' roles played in your own work, do you think, too?
Well, I just love what Malcolm just said. I mean, that's exactly right. And the fact that, Black stories carry the weight of the whole Black race with them. I mean, a Black movie is like, Black folks are just going, okay, so what's it gonna be? And if black folks don't like it, you're in serious trouble. You know, you can get your papers handed to you the next day. It's like you get, so I've been excommunicated. Okay.
You've been treated in the racial draft.
Yeah, I mean, you end up in a racial draft, and they could send you for Kanye or something. I mean, you could be in serious trouble like that, right? So, so yeah, I mean, you know, what Malcolm is saying is totally true. I mean, there's a lot of weight that's on a black film because black folks are there and they care seriously, but also you got the weight of 200 years we're trying to correct here.
Mm-hmm.
We got a lot of history, got a lot of stereotypes, we got a lot of all kind of stuff that weighs down our art. And it's hard to be an actor in the middle of that. It's hard to be a writer, hard to be a director in the midst of all that, but that's what we do. And so you just got to accept that. And you've got to kind of I think black filmmakers, and you know, Stefan can talk about this. I mean, you know, we have to have a real reason. We have to have a real point. We have to know exactly what we're trying to do. You know, it's not like white filmmakers can just do kind of, oh, you know, I just like making movies. It ain't like that for us. Mm-hmm. But we have to have real thought behind our projects, or you know, you're kind of doomed for failure. Mm-hmm. The other thing I'll just say real quick, you know, probably the best example of this, just as Black Panther is the huge successful film that opens as opening doors for us now. Back in the day, when The Wiz bombed, they didn't make another black film for like 20 years or something. It's like it wasn't really until Spike had success with She's Gotta Have It that they thought about black people as being directors. And so that was like, The Wiz is like 1977, I think, 76. And then you had that long ass desert experience to like, you know, the 1980s before we were filmmakers again.
It's that's fascinating. I have a question. I want to leap off of that, but I'm going to pause there to pull in Stefan, because I saw you nodding your head, and I always want to hear what the Amen Corner is saying.
No, I piggyback off of everything that Kevin is saying. You know, when I was, you know, coming up with ideas and writing, especially sci-fi, whatnot, you have to be very specific to the culture and respect our culture. And you have to worry about, oh, is this character stereotypical or not? Because if you feel it is, you're gonna get in trouble. Not only for black, you know, if white folks see if it's stereotypical and make fun of it, black folks will jump on you on that as well. So I did everything in my strategic power, with a lot of trial and error on my script, to write all my characters with love and with huge intention. For example, Calvin, CJ's brother, you know, he's a brother that gets killed by the police officers. You know, he's from Brooklyn. He has a certain swag, charm, Brooklyn swag to him. You know what I'm saying? So oftentimes we see him as dangerous in the media. Mm-hmm. But I made sure that he, in the film, he commits no crime. He's not a criminal or whatever. And it's just like, that's his culture. And then make sure that I frame the love and the relationship between these two characters very potently. So when he dies, you love him for who he is, and understand why the CJ wants to save his life so much. So I did a lot of deep research and a lot of trial and error through the script to really make sure my characters, you know, it's not a stereotypical thing, it's a cultural thing. Mm-hmm. And we have to understand that. And another reason why I did that is because every time a black person dies in real life by the hands of police, the media always trying to find a way to justify their death. Oh, they smoked weed. They had weed on them. Oh, he had this arrest record on him. That has nothing to do with the situation. So I had to make sure I strip all that out and just make sure we focus on the humanity of that person, regardless of what the profession is and everything. Focus on the humanity,
leaning into who they are, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Can I just say really quickly?
Please.
Very quick. I just want to say that Black audiences, I think, are everything. I think look what Black audiences did for Tyler Perry. Look at Black Twitter. look at what Black audiences may or may not have done for the election. They're everything.
I actually want to hang out there because Jocelyn, I was going to come to you with a follow up. I love one. Can you? You're like, no, you weren't. Yes, I was. One, can you say even more about that? And two, this question may be a little bit unfair, so tell me if I've hemmed you in too much. In sort of the rooms where the business decisions are being made, do you think people have an understanding of what these things that you as panelists are talking about when we talk about Black audiences? And maybe it's even more pointed to say, are people asking questions about what constitutes Black audiences and what they care about?
Yes.
And can I ask what those conversations sound like?
I'm not sure what the conversations sound like, but the conversations are being had. I can say that. What did you want me to say more about? I don't know how much more I have to say.
But yes, I want to flip back to the first thing that you said, though, because I do like this notion of Black audiences are everything. But what could you say even more in terms of like the way that Black audiences wield power, what that means in terms of the stories that the stories and narratives that we flock to? What are you noting?
Well, I pointed out Tyler Perry, but that's really not the focus of this panel, so we don't have to spend too much time on that. But I do want to stress that, like, the way that Tyler Perry did have his base, and I mean the way that there is a Black Twitter, Black people will come for what they like and what resonates with them. There is no doubt. And if like the more we get into Black literature and adapting that, like maybe we can get the base to start reading more, and for them to be more excited about the lit, and for them to want to see that as a film. Just to kind of tie it all back together, if you will.
I want to piggyback on that as well. So I think also the shift that goes with the shift of Black artists, we just want to see ourselves represented in different genres and all genres of that. And regarding with literature itself, we want to play it that way. There are so many great Black literature happening now that is in a genre of films, like comic books, such as Black, by Kwanzaa, which it talks about in a world where only Black people have superpowers. That's something Black audience will flock to. I mean, then we have Octavia Butler books are their IP is being, her IP is being swept up to adapt. So this, like, one thing I'm hearing from a lot of executives and my agent and whatnot, always saying, IP, do you have any IP that you want to adapt and whatnot? And because that's the thing that sells. If you have a lot of great Black literature work that's already been established, and this is a strong IP, Hollywood would be more than happy to make that because there's already have an audience to it. If something already has an audience to it and you adapt it to the film, that's guaranteed money. And right now, a lot of Black literature right now, especially in novels and in graphic novels, are being like, let me get that, and audiences is guaranteed for those IP.
Absolutely. Y'all, I want to make sure that I give a proper amount of time. We've had a few great questions pop up in the chat and that have been sent to me. So I want to make sure I save some time for there. I might bring us back to a few of my own questions because I'm greedy and want to know your thoughts. But I want to make sure we really do get audience engagement here because there have been some great things coming up. So one that I do like here, and I'm just curious what your thoughts are. I love the way that this is worded. Joanne has asked, who is behind the blackening of Hallmark? And does that advance Black film? Danielle, I'm sorry, you laughed so hard. I have to throw it to you first.
So you're talking about that they're interested in making those Hallmark movies with Black people in them now?
Yes, my assumption is, I believe Joanne is, if I'm going to make an assumption, I believe that is what Joanne is asking about, sort of the spate of particularly holiday Hallmark film.
I don't know anything about it, but I I do want to call your attention to, they had a homophobic kind of assertion that was made against them a while back, and I think that may have made a corporate kind of move where they maybe assessed what they were doing, because they had a lot of backlash against the homophobic thing they were doing, and I think they may have kind of reassessed themselves a little bit, and suddenly some Black folks have show up. So that might be part of it. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would buy that for sure. But other folks,
yeah, I think really, I think it's out of necessity. Like Kevin said, I mean, you have a backlash against, sort of the homophobic, things that they're doing. But also it's you have to keep up with what other people are doing, right? So if other folk are including, Black people in their narratives, then we have competition, right? If Hallmark is competing with Lifetime and Lifetime is putting Black people in their narratives, they gotta, you have to add more people. So, I mean, again, it's about competition. I don't know if there's a particular person that's like driving, the driving force behind that. But I mean, going back, not meaning to derail, but going back to audiences, right? If you have these audiences and, these audiences are saying, well, I choose to watch Lifetime and my ratings are going down or whatever, you got to reconfigure. Like you got to do something different. So I think that's a huge thing. But I like the blackening of Hallmark. I really like that, which is why
I do. I mean, maybe it's because I'm a Kansan by birth. I am just imagining like Black people marching on Crown Center in Kansas City, taking over Hallmark. But maybe that's why I love that question. But I hear what you're both saying about, again, maybe that's a good segue from the idea of how Black audience development really can drive production as well. We've got some other great questions, and I'm gonna read this question and maybe shape it just a little to hear some other thoughts that you all have. Beth asks, as a white person, I want to support and view Black writers and filmmakers, but I don't know of a good way to know what texts are from Black artists. How can you expand your understanding or find the work of these artists? And I'd sort of wonder for you, when you're thinking about looking for, maybe one way of thinking about this too, when you're looking for new material, if you're wanting to lean into adaptation, where do you go looking?
There's no like one way to ask. I ask around, or I remember some materials I always want to read. I don't know how to ask. It's just, ask your friends. That's what I do. Ask my close friends, who's into reading novels and whatnot. Or I will go to, before the pandemic, I used to go to Forbidden Planet, the comic book shop on Broadway. And I looked for the Black employees there. Say, yo, what's good independently, or what's up? And say, oh, there's nothing independent this month, but we got Miles Morales happening over here. And I said, all right, cool. I guess I take that for today. But I asked. That's about it. I think I'm reading something right now. It's called. Hold on. Here it is. It's called Excellence. Reading this, they talking about. The light. They're talking about adapting this graphic novel, and it's about Black people using magic to save the world. So that's hot, and that's from a friend of mine who said, "Stuff, you need to read this." So I just ask around. That's just me.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm hearing you say is, and I hope this doesn't come off as flip, make some Black friends.
Yes.
Look, where are the Black people at? what are they?
Yeah, that's
again,
it. Yeah.
I hear you. I want to throw this question, and Jocelyn, I'm going to try and throw this question to you a little bit. So this is from Janiyah Howard. Janiyah, I hope I'm not butchering your name. Janiyah is a freshman accounting major from Raleigh, North Carolina. Janiyah says, I understand that Black movies are building momentum, but there are obvious colorist issues with lighter skinned people getting more roles. What are your thoughts? Jocelyn, again, I know you, as you said, you're on the business side of the hiring of casting directors. But I'm sort of wondering, when you are in the process of hiring a casting director, what are you hoping to see in their resume or in their receipts, as the kids say, to know that they are right and that they will have the resources to do the casting that the project needs?
This is a hard one. And this is one that, I mean, it's a really good question. I struggle with it a lot. I'm not directly involved in the process, but I struggle with it a lot as far as colorism. And I also struggle with it in another way, which we could probably get to at a different time, but it is the casting of British Black performers to play American. But that's a whole other, they're very hot button.
But we can stay there.
I don't even know if I can answer your question. It's very true what you said. You're asking me what we look for. It's hard because where I work, we try not to have such a strong, how do I say this? I don't know how to say it, but I'm just gonna say it. We don't control that aspect. We like to leave it up to the creatives to choose the casting director that they want to have cast their show. So the corporation is not saying, you have to hire all these people because they worked on all of our shows and they have good resumes and we know they do good work. We want the creatives, we want the producers, the writers to come tell us who they feel would best bring their life and their cast to work.
Yeah.
But it is a problem. I acknowledge it, working on it.
Hey, I hear that. I would love to hear what others. So first of all, thank you, Jocelyn. I'm curious what others are, your experience, thoughts on how colorism has started. I almost lied and said has started to show up. Started. But how colorism exists in casting and working with Black films. Yes, Stefan.
Yeah, this is my personal experience. I just be brutally honest with my casting director and my producers. I'll be brutally honest. So example is that we had two actors who robbed a bodega, and during the casting process, we had wide ways of shades of Black people in it, and my associate producer, who's a Black woman, she said, Stefan, and even though it's a small scene, it might not mean much. Just make sure both the guys are not dark skinned or both the guys are light skinned. One or the other. Because we don't want to get, it's amazing how people can pick apart one little thing. Oh, if it's two dark skinned guys both robbing it, it's, oh, that's how dark skinned people be. Or if it's two light skinned guys done it, and then, oh, okay. So we actually purposely cast it that way so there won't be a tremendous issue. It's ridiculous. It sucks. It's absolutely ridiculous. But for that small thing, I just be honest. Me personally, I just be honest. I was like, look, we have a huge issue in our culture, and this it's historic. It goes, Spike showed it in School Days.
School Days.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I just be brutally honest. That's how I'm dealing with it right now.
Since that is one that colorism definitely has is something that film and representations have been dealing with really since the beginning. I don't want to cut this off if Danielle, Malcolm, Kev, if you wanted to jump in on that one, feel free.
I was just going to echo what you've already said, and sort of bring back what I think Kevin and Malcolm already said. It's 200 years, it's hundreds of years of weight on, these films and on these filmmakers. And so with that being said, you have to be intentional, very intentional about that. And so it's still progress to be made, right? It's still one thing that, you know, is very much so a part of, you know, looking at, watching, reading films, is understanding how we think as people, right? How these sort of this colorism and sort of you know, internalized racism really comes to how we, you know, will create our, how we do all these different things. So I think, you know, all this, the weight of history is constantly on our shoulders, which is leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to vibe with something that you mentioned, Jocelyn, about British filmmakers, no, sorry, British actors being cast in the role of African Americans, and it just tipped me off again to the boxes thing that I was talking about earlier. That I'm really sensitive to how the boxes are not only made for us, we make them for ourselves, and the weight of this history is kind of reinforcing all of that, and we have this kind of ongoing need to liberate ourselves from the way we conceive that Black people can be. And, you know, maybe a certain light toned person needs to be behaving a certain way, or doesn't need to show up in a certain situation, or this role really needs to be a darker person because they're behaving a certain way, or a British accent can't work. So it's funny because my grandfather, because he chose to leave the United States, and a lot of people didn't forgive him for that. It was like, you know, he abandoned us. He was writing all these wonderful things, and then he went and started writing about Europe and Africa and Indonesia, and, you know, things we don't necessarily relate to, and it's not reflecting us anymore. And I understand that feeling of loss, but at the same time, what that was doing was putting him in a box and saying, you have to stay in this box. You can't grow beyond this box. We need you to be this for us right now. And it's such a human need, right? And it's so understandable. But at the same time, hopefully we can gradually grow beyond it. And I'll just tell you one story from college. I went to the University of Miami, and it was culture shock for me because I'd grown up in Europe. And I had dreadlocks at the time. And I went into this creative writing class, and this other Black kid looked at me, and he was like, because he'd heard me speak. And so he was like, what do you all know about dreadlocks? And so I had to say to him, I had to explain to him, well, you know, the West Indies were actually a British colony, and, you know, so, but it just goes to show that, you know, because of our experiences and how we've been fragmented and we haven't learned about each other, we have these really strange fixed ideas about what can and cannot be, and hopefully we're breaking down those walls a bit.
Well, what you just said loops back to me in so many important ways to actually where Jocelyn started us with this notion of thinking about, I don't think our art gets away from needing to know about the diaspora, right? Like if we're going to, and you do actually have to have and it's, and I also hear the point, Malcolm, that you and Kev were making, how Black arts are expected to have this connection and knowledge of history, society, and social change that in many cases our white filmmaking peers are not expected to also have. So it's such an interesting and complex, and in some cases maddening, right, network and collision place. I should also ask, speaking of which, if Madam Julia Wright has joined us, could you just send either me or Dr. Graham a message to say that you're here?
I'm here.
Okay, all right. That's all I needed. I think, let's see. I'm trying to find one because this is probably gonna be our last one. What's a really good finishing? You know what? I'm gonna go back. See what you can do about making this a kind of final statement. This is a question that I loved from the original set. What makes a film great for you? What's the for where however you enter the world of film, What's your measure of success for it? And
That it got made.
So I was like,
It
that
got
is
made.
I hear that. Jocelyn, can I throw it to you on that one? What's your measure?
For me, it's writing, hands down. Writing, and then the ability to escape. That makes those two things. That is that not the answer you were looking for?
Oh no! What are you talking about? I am here for it. Matter of fact, I'm hoping that some of my students followed suit with me telling them about this so that they could hear that, because I said those two things do not need to be in opposition literally this semester. That's a whole other couple altogether. So I thank you. Malcolm, same question to you. What's your measure?
Well, I'm schizoid when it comes to this, because my career initially was in visual effects, and I worked on blockbuster movies, and so that was one world, but it wasn't sort of my culture, and it wasn't where my heart was in terms of creative impulses. And so when I started my own filmmaking journey and became an independent documentary filmmaker, of course, that's a different universe. So I'm going to answer from my heart and not from the industry that I was in before. For me, a good film is something that connects with people. And so the highest praise that someone can give me is if they come up to me and they say, you know what, I'm still thinking about your film. I saw it 2 weeks ago. It's still doing something inside me. I still don't know about this. I'm still thinking about that. This is taking me somewhere. I don't know where. And I just, I want to just fall down and cry from happiness when people say that to me. But of course, you set your expectations differently depending on what kind of filmmaker you are. And as an independent doc filmmaker, I think that part of your survival strategy to get through the production is you have to set your sights at trying to reach some people deeply as opposed to lots of people superficially, because you have no idea what reach your film is going to have. The odds are really stacked against you. And so you think, if only 100 people see this film, I need it to really, really impact them. And so, yeah, that's become my criteria. But I think that it works for me in other areas of life too. Like I prefer quality over quantity, and I prefer strong connections over lots of very superficial ones. So yeah.
I love it. It's that idea of being 9 people's favorite thing, right? Danielle, your measure.
Yeah, I mean, I would say also the writing, the story, and having the ability to bring a lot of different elements into one film, right? So if you're able to connect with history, if you're able to connect with, sort of social issues, if you're able to get me to care about these characters, all of them, not just the main person, right? You have a sort of, how do you say, I'm going to say buffet, because I can't think of another word. You have a range of characters, right? And you're bringing in sci-fi, you're bringing in drama, you're bringing in, these, horror. You're able to bring in different elements and create something new. To me, that is a successful film, partly because it's so hard.
And great, yes. And I'm loving the synergy that we're getting here. And Kevin, I'll throw it to you for our last one. What's your measure?
Well, yeah, I agree with everybody has said. I mean, Stefan the director part of you is always, if you can get the damn movie made, glory, hallelujah, obviously writing is a big thing, I think, for all of us. Just to be specific about the writing, I think for me it is whether or not I really achieved my point and my goal was with the writing, with telling the story. How close did I get to really sharing the whole intent of what this was about? I personally never look at how much money a movie makes. I think that's really not the point.
Mm.
I mean, that's when they started putting that stuff in USA Today about 30 years ago about how much movie, what #1 movie is at the box office, and ordinary people going like, well, this movie did real well, must be good. It made a lot of money. That was the downfall of American society. It started right there, you know, and in terms of culture, because, you know, how much money your movie makes has nothing to do with anything. And they specifically have used that against Black filmmakers for a long time. So yeah, you know, I think it's about the point of what we're trying to do. Did we achieve that point? Was it clear? Were people moved by it? Did it change points of view? Those are the things that matter to me.
I love it. I think that is y'all, thank you for that. One, I'm just going to do my own round of applause for this amazing panel. I'm going to beg the indulgence of all of our guests to hang on for just a few more minutes because we've got some really, really exciting announcements coming. I am going to once again thank our panelists. You were wonderful. You are fantastic. Please support them in their work, support their writing, their filmmaking, and the businesses and the artists that they are keeping afloat at a time when it's hard out here for a pimp. I will throw this back to Dr. Graham.
From all of us at HBW, thank you, especially for our star-studded cast this evening. Thank you. We encourage you to share the timeline, the interactive map, and the filmography for BLS 2020, as well as the 9 previous BLSs that are on our website. Since the BLS team is cueing me, I need to shut this down. Let me say we will see you next time. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Project HBW, and our blog, www.projecthbw.ku.edu. Please don't forget your generous contribution. This is the Baptist preacher in me coming out. While we do have to sign off now, you don't have to stop. Please feel free to continue the conversation on hashtag HBWBLS2020. Keep talking, y'all. Be safe, stay healthy, and take special care during this holiday season. Thank you for joining us, and good evening.